I became a manager for the first time after my second son was born. It was in 2007. And one of my challenges as a new manager was that I wanted to be likable. So, because I wanted so much people to like me, and I started managing people that I used to know before I started managing. They used to be my friends, and now they became my team members. And I believe that in order to be a good manager and for everyone to like me, I have to say yes. Saying yes will make me a great leader. And showing up for everyone, my team, my family, my manager meant I was strong, capable, and doing it right. But the truth is, saying yes to everything was actually costing me the most important thing, myself. And I know that I'm not alone because I talk with so many other women and other leaders. And this is a common pitfall new leaders have. So if you struggle to say no, if you feel like you want people to like you and you always say yes, rest assured, you're not the only person. And this week, from a Woman to a Leader podcast, I'm bringing you really a deep, personal, and powerful conversation with Sharon Ehrlich. And she's an executive coach and former IT leader with over 30 years of experience at companies like IBM and Citrix. And Sharon shares the story of how she hit a breaking point, trying to be the perfect business owner, caregiver, wife, and mother all at once, and how that moment taught her the transformational power of saying no. But this episode is not just about her story, it's about you. And if you ever felt like you are the person who fixes everyone's problems and everyone relies on you, you're afraid to say no because you don't want to let people down, or you're drowning in tasks no one else wants to do, I think this conversation is going to hit home for you and is going to help you. And Sharon shares practical scripts and strategies to say no with confidence, how to stop being everyone's go-to person without sabotaging your career, and why saying no is not selfish. It's actually generous. So for those who don't know me, hi, my name is Limor Bergman Gross, and you have reached From a Woman to a Leader podcast. And this podcast helps women like you, women in tech, be seen, respected, and promoted. And I want to encourage you to stick with me for this conversation with Sharon if you want to learn how to say no without burning any bridges, and share it with a woman you know that needs to hear it. You don't have to do it all to lead powerfully. So are you ready? Let's dive right in. Hi, Sharon. How are you?
Fine. Lovely to see you, Limor.
Lovely to see you too. Very excited to talk about the topic today about saying no, because I do think it's super, super relevant especially for women. And my first question for you today is that you often speak about the power of saying no as a strategic leadership tool.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you, Sharon, was there a moment in your life or career when you realized that saying yes was costing you too much?
Yeah, there was a very specific moment in my life, and that was a time where I had started a new business. My mother became ill, very ill, and was hospitalized and became an invalid. And I had an 8-year-old son at home and also a husband who needed a little bit of attention.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that I had reached my absolute breaking point because I was trying to drive perfection. I wanted to be the perfect caregiver mother.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be the perfect wife. And what I discovered was that it was not sustainable, but it wasn't that I had an epiphany. It's that I had a breakdown. And,
Yeah.
so it got really bad. And my husband was sitting across the table from me in a restaurant and simply not understanding why I could not stop crying. And then finally it came out that I was just so overwhelmed and I couldn't keep all of the balls up in the air at the same time. And something had to change. And it was affecting everything. It was affecting, obviously, my mental health, my physical health. But I think it was also affecting where I thought I was being a wonderful business person. I could not be because I was running 24 hours a day. And, it becomes obvious when a person is really teetering on the edge of exhaustion and confusion. And I had to change things. I had
Yeah.
to say no to things. I had to ask for help, which for me was like something so foreign. And that's what brought me to that point. And I've always kept this memory in my mind of that moment because I never want to be there again. And when I see women experiencing that or something similar to that, I'm happy to share this story because they should understand that there's a way out, that doesn't have to define you. And just because you started that way and you may have been living that way for 4 or 5 years, even decades, that you don't have to continue once you realize that it's no longer working for you.
Yeah, and thank you, Sharon, so much for sharing that story. I think that we as women, at least I can share from personal experience, we tend to think that if we say yes to everyone, like you mentioned here, your husband, your mother, your child, your business, like we are trying to satisfy everyone, eventually we hurt the most important thing.
Yeah.
We hurt ourselves.
Yeah.
And in your case, it kind of you reach a breaking point. You were obviously burned out and created this emotional reaction that you. But sometimes it can just be that we are not happy, we are angry, we are nervous all the time. It just impacts the quality of our life. What do you think about
Exactly.
that?
In my case, that was an extreme reaction. It doesn't always
Yeah.
manifest itself that way. It manifests itself, I can tell you, with some of my coaching clients, some of them experience sleeplessness. Some of them, because they are on this hamster wheel, the things that are important to them, like eating well, doing sports, moving, they no longer have the space for that. So then they start to become self-critical that they've gained some pounds or kilos, that they're not walking enough. And they start to, instead of looking at the situation for what it is, they start to blame themselves as opposed to looking at the bigger picture and saying, hey, wait a second, what's going on here? I used to be able to exercise 3 hours a week and now I don't do it. What has taken its place? What has filled those gaps? The other way that it manifests itself is at work, that you become that person where at first it seems like it's a compliment, where everyone is coming to your desk or coming to you remotely and asking you to do things like you're the fixer, you're the go-to person. But while you're the go-to person and not working on anything strategic, everybody else, their career is thriving, they're on high visibility projects, and you're swimming under this mess of stuff that no one else wanted to do, but have handed off to you because you're the reliable person who always says yes. So it shows up that way as well in the professional environment.
Yeah, and you raise a very, very good point. And I know several fixers, and I have several clients that are like that. What do you do? What do you do if you're in the situation that you're like, as you mentioned, like the fixer in the workplace? Everyone kind of rely on you. Everyone comes to you. In one hand, it feels great, right? Because you
Yeah,
are the person who people reach out to. They trust you. But it's eventually, holding you back, as you mentioned, like you are not able to work on things strategic enough and you're maybe not happy, maybe you're burned out or whatever.
yeah.
What would you say?
One of the first things I say to my clients is do an inventory of how you're spending your time. Before you start making any decisions, before you start saying no to anything, understand how you are spending your time and do this over a course of 2 weeks. Most of us are walking around with these very powerful computers in our purses and in our pockets that have voice memos or the possibility to write notes. And what I encourage my clients to do is just do it whatever way works for you. I just spent 20 minutes doing that. I spent 5 minutes doing this, or record it. I'm a writer, I'm still very old school. I like having lists and notes. And then once you have this inventory of how you've spent your time over the last 2 weeks, then start to assess, where are those things where I absolutely have to spend the time? I want to do those things. They add value for me. They are enriching the lives of the people I care about. What are those things that can be offloaded to others because they no longer add value? I've learned enough from them. I cannot grow from these things anymore. And what are the things that you just have to give back to their owners and say, it was a pleasure supporting you, but I can no longer support you because I have some other priority. So that's one part of the exercise. The other part of the exercise is trying to get clear about, if you gain time, what do you want to do with it? And that's not such an easy thing to do because, I think so many women are used to having no time, that if they gain time, the impulse is to say, oh, look, the floor is dusty, or, oh,
Yeah.
look, I haven't answered all of those emails, or something that still has nothing to do about you. And so
Yeah.
rather than create a situation where you create time and then you fill it with more stuff that is not fulfilling or that doesn't help you grow, is to understand where are your priorities and how do you want to fill the time. Now, make no mistake, saying no, offloading, that's where the coaching, that's where the real work comes
Yeah,
in for
this is
people
not
like you and
easy,
I,
right?
right?
It
Yeah.
sounds easy when you say it, but it's actually a very hard thing to do. And we're going to talk about it today. So, yeah, you said creating an inventory. By the way, nowadays with technology, you can write, as you mentioned, you can record. And actually, I like using the Notes app on my phone and sometimes recording, and it automatically transcribes it to a note. So you can do that too. So it's not kind of tedious to see where you spend your time. But the thing is, how do you actually say no? And especially, when you took on yourself things, naturally, kind of things accumulated, but there is really maybe no one to offload it. Maybe like you're the one who are doing certain things and like no one else is doing. Most cases, no one else want to do it.
Right.
How do you actually say no, especially, and we're talking here on women that work in tech or in a very male dominant field, like all of the people around you are men, you're the fixer, everyone reach out to you. How do you say no?
Well, I think one of the first things is not to say yes. And so our impulse is to say yes immediately, because think about culturally how most of us are raised. We are raised to be pleasers, to help people, to support everyone, and to be nice. And with that sort of background, the impulse is, when someone comes to you, is to say yes to something. And I would challenge you, my clients, everyone, to say, resist the impulse to say yes. Say, can I think about that for a moment? Can I come back to you tomorrow? Whatever is an acceptable amount of time in the space that you're working in. And this is very nuanced, because in some organizations that are very fast moving, 24 hours is not an option, right? You
Yeah.
need to be able to respond to people within a half hour or so. But still, that half hour gives you enough time to think about, if I do this, what do I have to give up? Because I cannot continue to just keep filling the plate. It will overflow. And so that's the first step, is resisting the impulse to say yes. You would be surprised when you don't say yes to people very quickly, how they become very resourceful in
Yeah.
coming up with other solutions and finding other people to do it. So that's the first step. The second step is to understand with whom it is you're speaking, because saying no to someone who is trying to, who has, a character where they just want to drive a result, right? That person, probably need to say no to them in a way to say, if I say yes to what I'm doing now, that project over there isn't going to get done. And I know that that's also a priority for us, for the team, for the business unit. And you put it in terms that that particular person understands, right? If you're dealing with someone who really cares about the harmony of the team, the harmony of keeping everybody included, making sure that we're working in an environment that's very democratic, then maybe the no is, I can say yes to this, but that is going to impact the team in this way. Are you comfortable with that? Because then it becomes a co-creative sort of decision-making process, as opposed to it being binary, yes, no, she's helping, she's not helping. We're talking about yes, but this is going to be the impact. No, but this is how things will continue to run. And so I really try to encourage my clients to think of it as it's not a yes, no response. It's a conversation, and you have to understand who the person is, who you're talking to, how they tick, and what their priorities are, so you find the right approach to saying no to that person.
I love both your tips, and I want to rephrase them again for our audience. So first, kind of what I heard from you is creating a pause. Like someone reach out, instead of immediately responding yes, you kind of take the space. Hey, I need 30 minutes, one day, whatever, to think about it. So you create this gap in time where a lot of times, people just find out their own solution. Either they do it or they find someone else. And the second thing you mentioned is kind of, putting in the context of, if I say yes to this, something else will suffer. So either it's the team or maybe another priority you're working on. So kind of approaching it as, hey, I'm working on this thing. Or, if I say yes to you, that may impact other things I'm doing or other things the team is doing.
Exactly.
Wonderful.
Exactly.
I wanted to share something with you and get your thought on that. So I have a client, actually, I have many clients who suffer with that, but one client kind of in particular, we talked about not just about saying yes, but when to say yes. Even if you say yes, we have the tendency to, someone reach out to us, as you said, immediately we say yes, and it may not be the thing that is most important, right? I mean, but we want to satisfy someone, so we just say yes, we drop everything, we do it. So I kind of, we talked to her about strategies to make herself important. And what I mean by that is like not saying yes immediately, and first of all, being less accessible to people, right? You're not always able to answer them immediately, right? If they call you, if they text you, if they Slack you, whatever they're using. And secondly, asking several questions like how urgent it is. When do you need it by? That kind of, force the other person to think really how important their request is. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a difference between urgent and important. And that kind of conversation helps make the distinction for both parties. Because when the person is coming to you and saying, yes, I need for you to take this over and this has to be done now, then you start to say, well, what does now mean to you? Does now mean like today by end of business? Does that mean by the end of the week, by the end of the quarter? And already you can start to negotiate. If it's something that you feel like you want to say no to, or that you can't say no to, because let's face it, there are some things that you cannot say no to. At least you understand what the parameters are and how you can fit it into everything else that you're doing. And I think that advice that you've given this client is so valuable, because when you don't do that, you become the dumping ground. Everybody knows I will go to Sharon and just say, Sharon, can you do this? And she's going to say yes without qualifying it in any sort of a way. And it's easy because I'm cleaning my desk off and giving it to this lady. And now I'm free to do the things that are strategic and that work for me. She'll figure it out. She always does, right?
Yes, and now what you mentioned about she will figure this out, she always does, brings another thought in my head. When we say yes to everything and we take everything on ourselves and we are able to do everything, eventually we will reach a point of we may reach burnout, But also, we'll create this expectation from people around us, from managers, that we can do everything. So think about it. If you're, and I have many clients who are like, oh, they want to persuade, maybe their manager to hire someone else to expand their teams. But when you take so much on yourself, it's much harder to build a case that you actually need more help. Versus, and this is where it gets tricky, and I would love to hear your thought of that. I sometimes tell people, sometimes you need to drop the ball on something, or maybe drop the ball is not the right word, but let things fall. So there will be a realization that you have too much on your plate and you need some support.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that, Sharon?
Well, yeah, you know what? Again, making a very general term, most women are driven by perfection, right? And so when someone is saying, can you do this? And we say yes to it, we deliver or we over deliver. So then when you get to the question of resources, there is no question to be answered because the resources work because you're getting it done. You're not sleeping. You're not spending any time with your family, but you're getting the stuff done and you're doing it absolutely perfectly. And so the question I would tell my clients to challenge the asker is, hey, you know what? I can do this, but not at the level of detail that you want. It's going to be very high level. It's as opposed to being a PowerPoint deck, I can give you a summary. I can give you an overview. That's the maximum I can do with the bandwidth that I have today. Be very transparent about it because they're either going to accept that or they're going to realize, we have a little bit of a resource problem here because I need not the overview, I need the 64-page PowerPoint deck, and this person isn't able to deliver that to me. And then you start, so I wouldn't call it dropping the ball. It's really setting the expectations about what can be done and what you are willing to do and able to do based on all of the other responsibilities that you have. The other thing that I think is quite important is because we don't talk or tend to talk about all of the good that we're doing, people don't understand how busy we really are. And this is a moment to amplify the projects that you're working on, the role that you're playing, and the impact that you expect to drive. So I'm working on this strategic project, which is important for the organization. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. You understand that these things are all consuming. I'm one person. So if I add this on, this is the reason why I can't give you what you're asking for. This is the reason why you only get an overview of it or, a one-page PowerPoint slide as opposed to 64 pages. So, but we have to use our words. We can't assume that people know how busy we are unless we tell them. We cannot assume that they understand that we're working on strategic work unless we tell them. They may have known and we think, oh yeah, but they remember we were in the same meeting together. No, they don't remember. They need to be reminded, and that's our responsibility to remind people of what we're working on and how those things are strategic in the organization, the team, or whatever the mission is.
Absolutely, Sharon. I absolutely agree with you. This is a very important point, that you need to make sure that people know all the things you're doing and how much you have on your plate. Many women struggle with how to do it. How to do it without sounding like, oh, you're complaining, you're, whining or whatever, but actually sounding like, yeah, I have a lot on my plate. I cannot take more, or I need some help. Do you have any thoughts about that? Any tips?
One of the things that I think is quite important, Limor, is when you have a leader. So all of us, I also come from IT. I worked for IBM, I worked for Citrix, so I understand how these heavily matrix organizations work. And everybody has a boss, right? Every single person has a boss. So the first thing is, how often are you meeting with your boss and updating that person on everything that is going on? Because if we tend to think that when we put our heads down and we grind and we do the work, that everybody understands how hard we're working. And this, nothing could be further from the truth. And so what I'd like to say is, first off, having a regular meeting, whatever that cadence is for your organization. Is it, I don't know, a couple of times a month? Is it weekly? Is it every other week? That, that's something that each individual has to decide. It's really important to make very clear what it is that you've been working on, and what progress has been made, and what has the impact been already. This is important. Is that bragging? No, that's an
No.
update. That is an update that actually your boss needs to know, because they also have a boss and they also have a lot of other direct reports. And then they start to understand that when you're coming to them, that they're getting full visibility on everything that you're engaged with. Now, when they come with the ask, or when someone from another business unit is coming with the ask that you be pulled off the project to do this, they understand, they can defend you. They can be your ally and say, hey, you know what? She's working on that, and that. And they know it off the top of their head. They don't have to ask you and wait for answers. They can defend you immediately. They can be a sponsor for you in that way, to say, you know what? That person is working on these 3 strategic projects, and we have this other project in the pipeline. And I think she would be perfect for it, because I know she can handle it. I know what kinds of things she's doing now. So it's not only creating visibility so that you don't get overwhelmed with work, it's also creating visibility for yourself, so that when those new projects come up, those stretch opportunities, those promotions, that you're one of the first people that come to mind. So that's talking about the one-on-one with your boss, but there are other ways you can do this in the organization as well. So I just leave it there, because you might have a question.
This is, so important, and I agree. Like everything you say, I agree. And you use the word bragging, which I also hear the same word by women that I talk to, and talking about what you do and what you, as you said, like accomplishment, is not bragging. Absolutely not. And it's so important, right? That your managers know what you are working on. What happens if, and it happened to me personally and also to a lot of women that I coach, the manager is not that accessible for you. So yes, you have a manager, and you probably faced it too, right? In the companies you work for. But because not all managers have regular one-on-ones, many of them are super, super busy. How do you still kind of, keep that some kind of communication with them and the awareness of all the things that you're doing?
Yeah. That is a real problem that exists, and it's a tough one to deal with, because the risk of not having some regular contact with your leader is that you end up talking at the end of the calendar year, for the 1-year review, and trying to catch them up on everything that you've done. And that's never an effective conversation. You will never get the raise, talking on December 31st or at the end of your fiscal year, trying to catch them up on every single thing that you've done. And so, there's no real easy answer to it. So the first thing I would say is, at the minimum, once a quarter, your leader, you have to force your leader, and you have to say to them, I need this from you. This is something that's important to me because of the responsibility that you've given me to do whatever it is that I'm doing. It's important for my professional development as well, that I have a talk with you at least once a quarter with an update. And you can be very, again, we go back to what I said a few minutes ago. You have to know with whom it is you're talking to. Is that a person who's driven by numbers or metrics? Because if it is, you make that meeting work for you. Even if it's a half hour, you have all of your KPIs, how you're doing, how you're tracking against them, because they probably don't have the time to talk about your vacation and to talk about the interpersonal relationships with the team, right? If you have that kind of leader, if you have the leader who cares about the interpersonal relationships and how everyone is doing, then you use the time that way and tie it into how the projects are moving along. The other thing you can do is reimagine what it means to be in contact with your leader. We always think that we have to be sitting in their office across the desk from them, but we understand that we can use this kind of technology. We understand if you have a leader who cares about their fitness and you know that they take a walk every day, say, hey, can we have a walking conference? We can talk on the phone. We don't have to have our screens in front of us so that you're getting your steps. I'm getting my information to you. So be a little creative. Ask this person, I know that you're busy. Well, how can I get on your calendar on interval X? What's the best way to do it? I'm flexible. I want to do it in a way that works for you, but that you still pay attention to what it is that I'm saying. So you have to be creative. But again, I always go back to using your words. If this person tells you, I don't have time for you, and you simply accept this, you're not going to get anywhere with them. That's you have to exert yourself. You have to tell them what you need. Otherwise, you don't get it. And let's face it, they have time for everyone else. So they can make the time for you, but you have to demand that you get this time. And that's not an easy conversation because I understand what power dynamics are. But on the other hand, if you're silent, you get nothing.
Wow, this is incredible. I mean, so important, Sharon. Yes, we don't demand what we need to get. We don't ask. And yes, we wait for, oh, the manager should schedule the one-on-ones. It's on them. But actually, we should demand their time. Say, yeah, I need that time from you. And make sure that they allocate this time for us. Not always it works, but worth at least to try it. I think that if the manager is really not accessible, because I've worked with managers who travel all the time, were not very, didn't have a lot of times, then you can tie it down to something that is important to them. Hey, I wanted to update you on this project that, you are whatever. I mean, tied kind of to things that that are important to them, so they will want to talk to you because you're eventually supporting them. That can be another strategy that you can take.
Yeah. The other strategy is if you have a little bit of insight into their calendar, just to piggyback on what you said, you understand that they're going to headquarters to talk to boss X about project Y. You can say, I know that you're going to be traveling in 2 weeks. This information I have might help prepare you for your meeting. So you're giving them something that they need as opposed to them feeling like, here's this person who's coming and making demands on my time and I don't have the time. Make it valuable for them. Find out how you're spending time with them, how you giving them information can be valuable for them. Because if you can't create that value, that becomes really challenging. And all of us, are hired to deliver value for organizations. They didn't hire you because they wanted you to warm up the seat, right? And so you just have to understand how that value that you were hired to deliver is important to the person that you are reporting to.
Wonderful. Anything else you want to share, Sharon, before we end today?
What I would say is, most of the women that I work with, and I'm sure it's the same with you, have so much more power than they think.
Yeah.
They have so many more possibilities to influence things than they give themselves credit for. And, not everybody can afford to or has the time to work with a coach, but I would tell you it is money and time well spent. Because sometimes we get so much in the weeds that we cannot see the forest for the trees. And you need somebody who has a background in your field, who understands it, so you don't have to waste a lot of time explaining and giving them the context, but can ask you the tough questions. And maybe that's not a coach like you and I, Limor, but maybe that's a friend that you have who can ask you the tough questions and then be honest with yourself and give yourself the honest answers. And this will help you understand that you can leverage your power. You can leverage the value that you bring and those superpowers that you have, because we all have them, but we somehow making ourselves quite small and not recognizing them and not using them to our advantage.
Absolutely. And I had some coaches in my career, and I wish I took more. So absolutely agree with that. And share, before we part ways today, Sharon, share with our audience about you and how they can find you.
So again, my name is Sharon Ehrlich. I am a native New Yorker who's based in Vienna, Austria. I am the founder and CEO of a company called Living While Leading, and this is a leadership and development practice where I build bespoke leadership programs for organizations, and I am an executive coach. You can find me on LinkedIn, Sharon Ehrlich, or you can look at my website, livingwhileleading.com.
Wonderful. And I'll make sure to put both on the show notes. Thank you so much, Sharon, for all the show today. It was really wonderful speaking with you today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much for listening to the episode with Sharon. And before you go, I would love to get your feedback. What resonated with you in today's episode? Leave me a quick comment or review, and it truly helps me to shape future conversations. And don't forget to follow and share From a Woman to a Leader with a woman in tech who needs a reminder of how powerful she is. And next week, we are going deep. I had a pleasure speaking with Chantel Botha, and she is an identity architect and X-Factor catalyst. And she helps women peel back the layers of who they think they are, rediscover who they really are. We'll talk about embodiment, pleasure, and power, and how putting yourself first is not selfish. It's revolutionary. Trust me, you don't want to miss this episode. So hit subscribe so you'll be the first one to listen when it drops next week. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Bye.